Today I want to talk about people that are contrarian just to be contrarian. Now, there's not a lot of people doing this. The majority of people, I think, kind of have the facts straight or are believing the media narrative, which in this case, I think, even though the media does present only one side of this Russia-Ukraine situation, I think they are correct that Russia is not necessarily Russian, the people, but the leadership of Russia is the wrong side here. I think there's just overwhelming evidence of this, and I'll get into it. But you have a few people, especially on YouTube, which is one of the worst platforms to get information on, and just full of people that are they just try to stir the pot. They take the other side just to take the other side. Even if the other side is wrong. The other side is not always right, for sure. There are times taking the other side of the majority is correct. That can be correct. But in this case, it's not. It is not correct that Russia is the good guy in this situation. It's just not true when you look at the body of evidence. And I will say the points that this guy techlead makes and that Russell Brands makes, there are a few good points that these guys make. They're not the only two doing it. Breaking Points has also kind of had, they've said some things that are a little bit inaccurate. They've kind of taken, I wouldn't say a pro-Russian stance, but not as attacking of Russia as maybe they should be. Or Putin in general is in general just not a guy that I want to get behind. There's nothing that I've seen that suggests that he is in the right for what he's doing. But I want to tell you about the few things I think these guys are getting right. And number one, yes, our U.S. media, the Western media in general, is it's definitely favoring the Ukrainian side. And it's not telling us any of the negatives of that Ukraine has done. And there's a few things. One, yes, there was too big of a Nazi presence in Ukraine. Now, it's not the entire government by any means, but the government was working with a Nazi group to fight the insurgency in the East, or the separatist groups in the East since 2014. That's been going on for a long time. That's a problem. There's been corruption in Ukraine for a long time. There's been some election corruption. One thing that they point out is that the U.S. had a role in getting Zelensky put in charge. And the guy prior to him was also kind of a pro-West leader. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And yeah, I have no doubt that the U.S. was involved in getting Zelensky in power. I have no doubt that was the case. But, we didn't do it by invading and blowing up children's hospitals, which is what what Russia is doing right now, is invading and blowing up children's hospitals, shooting at civilians in cars with tanks, running over civilians in cars with tanks. Way different than some sort of covert operation the U.S. may or may not have done to install Zelensky. It's not a balanced comparison. It's a false equivalency. That's the terminology for it. These people, they want to use these false equivalencies. And the U.S. maybe installed Zelensky, and Russia is currently trying to install a guy that they previously installed before. Yanukovych was basically installed by Russia before Zelensky. And they did it probably the similar way as the U.S. did with Zelensky, manipulating the media and the bots and all the things that Russia does. Well, we do the same thing, of course, it wasn't done with violence back then. Well, I'm sure there was some violence. There always is some of that, but covertly. So they're making the argument that the U.S. installed Zelensky, and so Russia is justified. Prior to the Zelensky, Russia installed Yanukovych. It's the same thing. And then they're trying to do it again much more violently. They're trying to put Yanukovych back in. That's the whole thing here. And so it's a false equivalency. there are different degrees of wrong. One wrong is not equal to another wrong. And that's what these guys, yes, the U.S. has made so many mistakes. We've made a lot of foreign policy mistakes, and the West has too. There's a lot of things you can point at. Iraq, obviously, is maybe one of the bigger ones in recent history. So there is that, but not everything is equal in this world. You can't treat everything the same way. So these ideas that they're throwing out are pretty bad. In this one, I watched these videos, and it's so painful to watch this guy. He's a con artist. He's conned people out of money with some bullshit cryptocurrency. He says outrageous shit just to get clicks. He's one of the worst people on this platform. He's just an example of what's wrong with this platform, what's wrong with social media. People say outrageous shit just to get clicks, and bad publicity is good publicity, and unfortunately in this world. I mean, there's a lot of evidence. We've seen a lot of politicians do this sort of thing. It unfortunately works in today's world. But when you watch this video in particular, another thing that he makes a point of is Ukrainians not being able to leave, bank withdrawals banned. They've put in conscription, which, yeah, I agree that's tough, and I don't necessarily agree with them forcing people to fight, which they have done. And you're not hearing about that in the West. You're not hearing about the forced conscription a whole lot. You've heard about it. It has been talked about. And you can get the correct information despite, if you watch CNN all day, you're not going to ever hear certain things. But it is possible. We have a very open internet in the U.S. We have access to all the information that you need. You can get both sides. You can get the other side. And I'm giving you the other side. I'm giving you some of the things that Ukraine is making mistakes on, and they are making mistakes. They are not perfect by any means. But the mistakes that Ukraine is making, the things that Ukraine is doing, don't hold a candle to what Russia has done. Not even close. Has Ukraine bombed a children's hospital in Russia yet? Has that happened? I don't think so. And just so many things. He doesn't have any grasp of the facts. Just watch this video. He even makes the statement that he doesn't even know where Ukraine is on a map during this video. And this is the guy trying to give us advice as to, your opinion doesn't matter if you don't even know where it is on a map. It's completely invalid at that point. And so many things he says just are completely wrong. He has done no research on the subject. And, he gets 500,000 views with just a complete moron, a complete idiot. And, people say, and if these videos get banned, which would not surprise me if YouTube takes these down, he will cry about cancel culture like a lot of these guys do. It's just cancer culture. Why don't I have the right to First Amendment free speech? Well, let's talk about the First Amendment a little bit. First of all, the First Amendment allows you to say whatever you want in your own home. There's limits to where you can do it. You can do it in your own home. Once you start doing, you can do it for the most part in public. Well, if you do it at a place of business, where you work, your employer has a First Amendment right to fire you. They can fire you for things you say. And they can fire you for things you say outside of work too. And that is protected under the First Amendment. And if YouTube would take his videos down, that is YouTube's First Amendment right to do that. They have a right to free speech, and they can limit whatever speech they want. It's allowed. It's all allowed. So this guy can say all these things. It won't get him any legal trouble. But if he gets these videos banned, which I would not be shocked by, he's going to cry about cancel culture. And I think cancel culture is way overboard. I agree with that. The cancel culture is extreme. And there's some of the things that people get canceled over, some of the stuff they're trying to cancel Joe Rogan for, I think are ridiculous. I don't agree with that. But the extremes, to me, I'm okay with him getting canceled. With somebody like this getting canceled, yeah. Somebody that's spreading just extreme viewpoints that are completely wrong, yeah, cancel him. I'm okay with that. Doesn't hurt my feelings. Yeah, he references his own tweet as evidence at one point. Russia, like I said, Russia's the one that invaded a sovereign nation, not Ukraine. Russia is openly bombing civilian populations. They are shelling apartment complexes. They shell buildings on the campus of a nuclear power plant. Has Ukraine done any of these things? Ask yourself this. Yeah, and he says in another one of these videos, Ukraine is the aggressor for trying to join NATO. What is more aggressive, attempting to sign some papers to join an alliance? And yes, I know there's treaties involved where the U.S. would then have to defend if there was an invasion and things like that. I get all that. But is that as aggressive as driving your tanks into a country and shooting at civilians? Is that as aggressive? I don't think so. And he tries to make a comment about getting a balanced approach. And not in any of his videos has he mentioned any of these negatives that Russia has done. He compares this conscription by Ukraine to Nazi Germany. Okay. Let's get on to Russell Brand. This guy, this tech lead, he is one of the worst people probably on the internet. Yeah, here's some of the things Russia has done. They drove a tank over, they stole a Ukrainian tank and drove over a civilian car. And bombed a children's hospital yesterday. And they made the excuse that there was no children in there and the military was using it. This dude shot a civilian car with an elderly couple in it. Okay? This is Russia. And then Russell Brand also has been going on and on about this. And to be fair to Russell Brand, he's made some better points and used a little bit more in the way of evidence to make his points versus techlead. I got to give him credit for that. And it's not a completely bad take. He's made some good claims here. It's better informed. And yes, he makes the claim again, U.S. installed a U.S.-friendly regime to push Ukraine towards NATO. Yes, the U.S. did do that, but I've talked about Russia also did that. And this is what led to war, and to some extent, the West and the U.S. are partially to blame. I would agree, the U.S. and the West are to some extent to blame for this, and I think the U.S. should never have pushed Ukraine to try to join NATO. I really wish they wouldn't have, and potentially this may not have happened. It is possible this might not have happened if that had never happened. But still, this is a false equivalency yet again. Maybe the U.S. did that, and yeah, they did do that. Well, they did do that. But then what Russia has done historically, they've done the same thing, and then currently what they're doing is way worse than that. So another false equivalency. I think that covers basically everything I wanted to cover. And there's a lot of other guys saying these same things. So I'll leave it at that. Just another ramble by me. But it's just these people that want to be a contrarian just to be contrarian, to go against the consensus view, to go against the media. You got to go against mainstream media because they're always wrong. They're not always wrong. They are wrong way too often, but they're not always wrong. So we'll leave it at that. See you guys.